Lesson 29. Frieda tells a story, King Arthur. Extract from Frieda's diary. I asked Mr. Evans today about King Arthur. His name kept coming up, at Snowdon, in his story about Carnarvon, and when he told us about the great Roman city that had been discovered after months of digging in Monmouthshire at Caerleon, that's Camelot, where King Arthur held his court, he said. Was King Arthur a real person, or is it all a story? I asked. Mr. Evans, oh yes, there was a real Arthur, an Arthur who fought the Saxon invader and won a great battle at Mount Badon in AD 500. But around this shadowy human figure, fighting among the mountains of Wales or on the wild cliffs of Cornwall, where you can still see, at Tintagel, the ruins of Arthur's castle, has grown up a great collection of romantic stories that run like a brilliant thread through the pattern of English literature, from the early Anglo-Saxon and Norman writers, through Chaucer and Malory to Tennyson. These old stories tell us of Arthur's miraculous coming, of how he became king and gathered together a brave company of knights, the Knights of the Round Table. Frieda, why was it round? Had that any special meaning? Mr. Evans, yes, it was to show that no knight, not even the king himself, was head of the table, all were equal and the king was just first among equals. You can still see the table, a great round piece of wood hanging on one of the inner walls of Winchester Castle. But though 600 places in the British Isles claim some memory of him, he is forever essentially the hero of Wales, and it's rather significant that the Welshman who became King of England, Henry VII, called his eldest son Arthur. I think Arthur's name is so widespread throughout England, and the continent, too, because Welsh bards in Norman times and before that, travelled about singing the songs and telling the stories about him. Those stories were gathered together by Sir Thomas Malory, and it is from his Morte d'Arthur that all the later writers and poets have drawn the materials for their stories and poems. Frieda, could you tell us one of the stories of Arthur and his knights? Mr. Evans, there's hardly anything that a Welshman likes better than telling a story, unless it's listening to one, and I'm a Welshman. And this is the story he told us. The story or Sir Galahad. One day as King Arthur sat in his court at Caerleon surrounded by the Knights of the Round Table, a servant entered and said, Sir King, I have seen a strange sight. As I walked along the bank of the river I saw a great stone, and it floated on the water. There was a sword through the stone, and the handle of the sword was thick with precious stones. When they heard this, the king and all the knights went to see this strange thing. It was just as the servant had said. Moreover, when they looked more closely they read the words on the sword, No one shall draw me out of this stone except the knight at whose side I am to hang. And he must be the best knight in the world. The knights asked Sir Lancelot to draw the sword, for he was known as the best knight in the world. But Sir Lancelot said, The sword is not for me. I dare not try to take it. Many of the knights tried, but none could draw out the sword. So they returned and took their places again at the round table. No sooner were they seated than the door opened and an old man, dressed in white, entered the hall, followed by a young knight in red armour, by whose side hung an empty sword sheath. The old man bowed low to the king and said, Sir, I bring you a young knight, Sir Galahad, through him Britain shall win great glory, and he shall see the Holy Grail. The Holy Grail, said the knights, their faces full of awe, for the Holy Grail was the cup from which Christ had drunk at the Last Supper. It had been brought to Wales by Joseph of Arimathea, but because of man's sinfulness it had been taken from human sight. None of the knights had seen it, for it could be seen only by the pure in heart, and all of them had sinned. When the feast was over, the king took Sir Galahad to see the sword in the stone. I will try to take the sword, said Sir Galahad, for, as you see, my sword sheath is empty. He seized the handle of the sword and drew it easily from the stone and placed it in his sheath. While they were all filled with surprise, a lady came to them, riding on a white horse, and said, I am sent to bring you word, O king, that great honor will be done to you and all your knights. Today the Holy Grail will appear in your hall. Then she rode away and no one could ask her any further questions. That evening as each knight sat in his seat round the table there was a noise of thunder, so great that the whole palace seemed to shake, and there came into the hall a great beam of light, brighter than any of them had seen before. The light touched them all, and a sweet scent was in the air. And in the beam was the Holy Grail. But no one could see it except the pure-hearted Sir Galahad. They all sat silent with amazement and awe until Arthur rose and gave thanks to God for the vision that had come to them. Then Arthur's nephew, Sir Gawain, stood up and said that he would make a vow to go for a year and a day in search of the Holy Grail. Immediately other knights, 150 in all, rose up and swore to do the same, and among them was Sir Galahad. King Arthur was full of sorrow at this. His knights would wander into far-off countries, many of them, he knew, would forget that they were in search of the Holy Grail, and would go on other adventures and never return. Meanwhile, the heathen enemies from whom he had protected his land would come again to conquer him. Turning to Sir Gawain he said, "Nephew, you have done wrong, for by your act I have lost the noblest company of knights that ever brought honor to any country in Christendom, for I know that you knights, whom I have loved as my life, will never again all gather together in this hall." The knights, too, were filled with sorrow, but they could not break their vows. So the next day, after they had worshipped in the church at Camelot, the knights who had made the vow rode together out of Camelot, and the people wept as they rode away for they felt they would never return. Frieda, and did they ever return? Mr. Evans, some of them did, but not Sir Galahad. He wandered for years searching for the Holy Grail. He had many adventures, every one of which would be a separate story. He rescued maidens who had been imprisoned. He was himself imprisoned for a year by an evil king in Sarras in Babylon where Joseph of Arimathea had lived 300 years before teaching the people the true faith. Finally he was freed and he forgave the king who had imprisoned him, and when that king died, Galahad was made king. But though at times he had seen again the light of the Holy Grail, he never saw it in reality. Every morning, early, he used to go into the little church to pray. Then one morning, very early, as he knelt, he saw a man in the dress of a bishop, and the bishop was surrounded by a great band of angels. The bishop said, "Come here, servant of the Lord, and see what you have so long wished to see." And Galahad took the Grail in his trembling hands. "Do you know who I am?" said the bishop. "No," said the knight. "I am Joseph of Arimathea whom God has sent to show you the perfect vision of the Holy Grail." Then Galahad knelt and prayed. As he prayed a hand came from heaven and took away the cup. And when, a little later, the people came to the church, they found Sir Galahad dead. Frieda, what a wonderful story! But what happened to King Arthur? Mr. Evans, well, though some of the knights returned, the great days of the Round Table were over. While Arthur was fighting his enemies in France, the wicked knight Sir Modred, whom Arthur had left to rule the land while he was away, plotted against the king and gathered together an army to fight against him. Arthur returned and a great battle was fought in the far west of Britain by the seashore. The traitors were defeated and Modred was killed by Arthur, but only one of Arthur's knights, Sir Bedivere, was left, and Arthur himself was very badly wounded. Then Arthur said to Sir Bedivere, "The end has come. Take my sword Excalibur and throw it into the deep water. Watch what happens and come back and tell me." So Sir Bedivere took the sword and went to the water's edge. But the handle of the sword was thick with precious stones and he couldn't bear to throw it away. So he hid the sword under a tree and came back to the king. "What did you see?" said the king, "and what did you hear?" And Sir Bedivere said, "I saw nothing but the waves and heard nothing but the wind." "That is untrue," said Arthur. "I order you, as a faithful knight, to go again and throw the sword into the sea." Again Sir Bedivere went, and again he was tempted. "It is a sin and a shameful thing," he thought, "to throw away so noble a sword. It should be kept so that people in all future times can see it and be reminded of this great king." So he left the sword under the tree and returned again to the dying Arthur. "What did you hear? What did you see?" said Arthur slowly. And Bedivere said, "Sir, I saw the water washing on the rocks and heard the wind blowing in the trees." "Traitor," said Arthur, "you have betrayed your knighthood and your name. Go again and do as I command. If you fail this time I will rise and kill you with my hands." Then Sir Bedivere went quickly back to the water's edge and took the sword from where he had hidden it and closed his eyes for a moment so that he should not see the handle and the precious stones, and then he threw it with all his might out to sea. But before the sword touched the water, an arm rose out of the sea and caught the sword, raised it 3 times and then drew it under the water. Bedivere hurried back to the king and told him what he had seen. "Help me down to the water's edge," said Arthur, "but hurry. I have waited too long, my wound has taken cold and I may die." So Bedivere raised the king and took him on his shoulders and brought him gently down the rocks to the water's edge. And as they reached the shore they saw a small ship there, and in it were many noble figures and among them 3 queens dressed in black with crowns of gold on their heads. "Put me in the ship," said Arthur. So Bedivere gently lifted the king into it and laid him down. Then the most beautiful of the queens knelt beside him, took off his helmet, which was cut through with a sword, and, looking at his pale face, wept and said, "Dear brother, why have you waited so long?" Bedivere cried out, "O my lord Arthur, what shall I do now you are taken from me, and all my friends of the Round Table are dead? Where shall I go, alone, among new men, strange faces, other minds?" And Arthur said, "Find comfort in yourself, for I can give you no comfort. My life is ended. The work of the Round Table is done. The old order has changed, giving place to new, but God's will is done in many ways. Pray for my soul, more things are done by prayer than this world dreams of. I am going now to the valley of Avilion where my wound may be healed." As he spoke, the ship slowly moved away, and Bedivere watched it until it could be seen no more. The ship slowly moved away. "So," said Mr. Evans, "Arthur went away, and, though you can see his grave at Glastonbury, where it says, 'Here lies Arthur, once king and king to be,' many people believed that he was not dead but was still living in the happy valley of Avilion until his country needed him, when he would come again to free it from its enemies." Exercises. Exercise 1. Use the following words and phrases in sentences. Discover, float, filled with surprise. Shadowy, armor, rescue. Human, handle, beam of light. Cliffs, glory, scent. Romantic, awe, vision. Miraculous, sinfulness, vow. Claim, sin, verb, go in search of. Significant, feast, material. Sheath. Exercise 2. Answer these questions. 1. Was King Arthur a real person? 2. What English writers have written about him? 3. Why was the Round Table round? 4. Was Sir Galahad present when news was brought by a servant about the sword? 5. Why did Sir Lancelot not try to take the sword from the stone? 6. What was the Holy Grail? 7. Why had none of the knights seen the Holy Grail? 8. What did Sir Gawain after the vision? Why was Arthur full of sorrow at it? 9. Why did Sir Bedivere twice disobey his king's command to throw away the sword? 10. What did some people believe about King Arthur? Exercise 3. Give an opposite of the following words. Wicked, float, question, deep, valley. Dead, best, remember, round, old. Edge, empty, servant, true, under. Early, easy, enemy, slowly, nothing. Sorrow, appear, against, closed, future. Exercise 4. Rearrange the order of the words in these sentences so that they make sense. 1. Us told stories many Mr. Evans King Arthur about. 2. Arthur person was a real, it is or story all only. 3. Still can at Tintagel ruins you castle his see the of. 4. A story hardly anything than that there's Welshman better likes. 5. Many knights but the sword of the outdraw could none tried. Exercise 5. Complete the following phrases with words of your own. All the phrases have come in the last 3 lessons. 1. I thought you would like. 2. Could you tell us? 3. There's hardly anything I like better than. 4. No sooner had I arrived than. 5. It's a pity. 6. I'm no good at. 7. What I like doing is. 8. This story concerns. 9. I'm tired of. 10. If I, will you promise? Composition exercises. 1. Tell the story of Sir Bedivere and the death of Arthur. 2. Tell the story of a legendary, or real, hero of your own country. Hop, the boys and girls at the school my cousin Ted goes to acted the story of King Arthur as the teacher read it to them. Ted is the boy with the sword. And then King Arthur knights Galahad by tapping him gently on the head with his sword, gently. Dear friends, thank you for watching our channel and learning English with us. Subscribe. And we wish you great luck in achieving your goals.